And I didn't have the cameras up. There we go. How's it going, everybody? My name is Everett Harn, and you are tuned in to the Geeks on Screen from geekswithwives.com. And tonight, we've got some special guests because all these people have been on the podcast before, but only a few times. So if you remember from way, way back, he had to take a sabbatical. We got Agasicles Stanis. How's it going, Agasicles?
Boom.
Boom. I can't remember which podcast you were on, Agasicles. What did we talk about when you were on this last time?
So I was on a couple screens podcasts. I was on one where we did, can't remember what the topic of the week was, but we talked a lot about Dracula Untold.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, that was good. There were a couple of us on the podcast who thought it was a good movie.
You didn't like that movie, Brad? Jeez. Well, there you hear talking is Brad Bell from Cackalack. All right.
That's right. I'm still coming down from the geekasm yesterday I had from the Force Awakens trailer. So
Yeah, no doubt. I'm
glad
still
to
twitching.
be here tonight.
I totally botched that up too, Brad. I was going to be like, Brad, are you all right tonight?
I'm always all right.
And then finally, we have the person that caused a laugh riot on the animation podcast that we did. We got CK Stewart. How's it going, CK?
What's up? It's going pretty good. I'm so excited to be back, especially since last time I think I spent most of the time talking about a book adaptation. So, as we've already found out, I have a lot of emotions about books. I'm so excited to share them.
Yeah.
CK, your knowledge on the Divergent franchise is only rivaled by Tommy's on 50 Shades of Grey. So to have those two great minds matching wits on this epic
That means a lot to
podcast,
me.
I'm honored
You know
to be
what?
a part of it.
I'm so excited. He sets the bar so high, but I have a lot of passion for, hate watching my own thrilling adaptations. So, he brings a lot to the table, and I'm just doing my best to follow in those footsteps with Insurgent.
Well,
Going with that.
Gascles shouldn't be surprised that we're still making fun of Tommy for 50 Shades of Grey.
That's a long running shtick at this point.
I think even our viewers are getting tired of it.
Hashtag Team 50. We got to milk that for all.
Well, I know Tommy's watching, so you can tweet at
We
Tommy.
love you, Tommy.
Yeah. So if you hadn't figured out by now because you haven't been listening, tonight's main topic is book adaptations. But first, we're going to go into what we watched this week. And since we were off last week, this can include, however long, until you were last on the podcast. What have you guys been watching? Let's start with CK. CK, what have you been watching?
Oh, wow. It's good that we started with me because my list is so short. I watched The Flash, and obviously I watched Daredevil. I've been waiting for that for a million years, and it was amazing. Totally worth it.
Yeah.
And I watched a really horrifying amount of reality television. Just so everybody knows, there are some quality contestants on The Voice this season. You should check that out.
I watched Judge Judy with my mom and my grandpa, so I'm down.
There you go.
That's
You know
how we
what?
pass
That's
time in North Carolina.
I was about to say, I'm pretty sure half the people on that show are from North Carolina. Freaking Judge Judy, she's awesome. So let's talk about Daredevil, because I assume, Agascles, you didn't write it on here, but I assume you watched it as well, right?
I have actually not watched it yet.
Oh man,
I've got too big a backlog, and I haven't had a chance to jump in on DD yet.
All right, well, we're not going to spoil anything. I want to do a Daredevil special where all we do is talk about Daredevil, but we'll see if that happens. What did you guys like about Daredevil?
Kingpin, Vincent D'Onofrio, such a great performance. I just watched the flashback episode with him, and that was just done so well. The things that he dealt with his father and protecting his mother, and how he is such a brutal but affectionate character at the same time is hard to make you root for a villain. Very few shows do that, or root for a flawed person. Game of Thrones does it very well, but I think that's one of that show's greatest strengths, and the best villain of the year so far. We'll see when Kylo Ren comes around in Star Wars, but
Oh, I loved. He was so like eccentric, without spoiling. I mean, he's like they didn't do him just straight up mob boss like he is in the old cartoon, but like there was a throwback where his girlfriend, they're going through his suits and she says something about a white suit, and they just both kind of laugh like, who wears white suits, because Kingpin wears the white suit in the comics and stuff. And there's even an episode where he's got like a big scarf on, and whenever he's got the scarf and the overcoat on, he looks perfect, man. I've been saying that they cast him so well.
So let me ask you guys this, because so this year in particularly, maybe the last couple of years, I've kind of had this not problem, but um, this need to kind of slow down on the, I shouldn't say automated acceptance, but this acceptance of anybody who they kind of do this anti-hero spin on. And I'm like, no, dude, like if that dude's a murderer, he's a murderer, right? Like, don't try and spin him as like a good guy, as a bad guy who with like good intentions or whatever, right? So like
Yeah.
like I'm anti-Dexter, right? If I can use that term, like I'm not rooting for that guy. He's a murderer, right? And
Right.
so how did you guys emotionally feel about Kingpin if they tried to put that kind of anti-hero spin on him?
Well, the Kingpin is he's the bad guy, so you don't want to root for him. You almost feel sorry for him, but he is like the murderer that tries to connect with his feelings, almost mostly unsuccessfully. But he's trying to do. It's kind of like what they say a lot of like terrorists or whatever feel like. They feel like they're the ones doing right whenever everyone else sees that they're doing wrong. And I feel like that's Kingpin's whole thing, is he feels like he's doing good, but he's just murdering people and all this stuff. But as far as anti-hero, Daredevil, they take him, unlike the Darefleck, Ben Affleck movie. I just coined that. Unlike Daredevil, like where he's straight up just killing folks, they went the non-murderous route
Okay.
with Daredevil in this movie, and it worked really well. And Charlie Cox is fantastic as Matt Murdock.
Ooh.
And
Let me spin the question this way: compare 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 Kingpin to Malcolm Merlin, right? Because they try and do a little
Right.
kind of anti-hero take with him on Arrow, and I'm like, nope, not buying that. That
It's
dude's a
so
crazy, insane murderer.
exactly. It's so funny that you mentioned that. I was just thinking about that as Everett was talking when you asked that question. I think that in terms of that kind of villainous storyline, Daredevil achieves what Arrow sort of aspired to achieve. Maybe in the first couple of seasons, probably especially the first season of Arrow, because in terms of motivations and things like that, Daredevil and Malcolm Merlin are pretty similar. I mean, they both have this really horrific perspective on what it takes to rebuild their city in this like safe, beautiful,
Yeah.
not necessarily family friendly, but like livable city. And I think the biggest issue that Arrow had with Malcolm Merlin that I don't think that Daredevil haven't had as much of a problem with is that Malcolm's played by John Barrowman, who's such an intensely popular figure in fandom
Yeah.
that ultimately you could do what I think Daredevil is unafraid to do with Vincent D'Onofrio, which is make them clearly this really kind of emotionally difficult and certainly very like physically intimidating and emotionally intimidating and very dangerous person, and just have them be that way. Like you're
Yeah.
supposed to understand that they are not a good person and they're not doing good things.
Oh, the Kingpin straight up, he's like sociopathic, and you can tell in the way he talks and kind of holds himself that he's crazy. He's got
Yeah.
like issues.
And when you're watching scenes with him and the people who kind of surround him and work with him and have more personal relationships with him, like people don't have relationships with Kingpin where like, they feel really fondly about him and they want to fix him and they have all this faith that he can become a better person. Like they're just sucked into this world that he's built. Like it's I don't know, it's kind of like being a cult leader in a sense. Like you're sucked into this vision that he has and you get it, as
Yeah.
opposed to Malcolm, where you're eventually supposed to feel like, oh well, he feels kind of bad about what he did and he cares a lot about Thea and maybe he's okay sometimes. Like
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I think that Daredevil is less concerned about making Vincent D'Onofrio that kind of like family-friendly fandom person who sticks around for a long time, whereas Arrow was like, oh, everybody likes John Barrowman. We should probably fix this.
Yeah, John Barrowman's infinitely more likable than Vincent
That
D'Onofrio.
too.
So
I just buy in a little bit more to Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin than I do John Barrowman's Malcolm Merlin. I don't know why. That's just a personal. I think there's a quality level between and I love Arrow, guys. Do not think I'm talking bad about it. I don't want to piss off our listeners, but I think
hates Arrow.
I think there's this very big quality leap with Daredevil, as far as performances, as far as everything from cinematography and writing and everything of that nature. And I'm just buying Vincent D'Onofrio more, and I'm buying that he is emotionally struggling with the decisions that he has to make, and going back to Agastocles' original question, how do you compare the two? I guess I've had more of a background with Kingpin and the cartoon and reading the Ultimate Spider-Man comic books. Is he's always been this dual personality. There's Wilson Fisk, the philanthropist, and then there's Wilson Fisk, the mob boss, pretty much. Mm-hmm. And the public perceives him one way, and everybody actually knows how he is. And I feel like the dynamic between him and his wife really goes a long way to not his wife, excuse me, his girlfriend here, mm-hmm. goes a long way to humanize him, whereas with Malcolm we only see that in flashback, so he doesn't have that bridge to kind of ground Malcolm just feels like way out there in supervillain territory. That was just my take on it.
Well, Daredevil's like hyper realistic as well. So in terms of believability between the two bad guys and believability between Oliver Queen and Matt Murdock, like Matt Murdock, when he goes out to do vigilantism, he gets his ass kicked sometimes.
Yeah, I've heard that about the show. That they're like he gets beat up and he's like in pain the next day, whereas Oliver,
right? Yeah, Oliver.
Same thing. Brad said, Arrow is an absolutely awesome show. It is my probably top favorite show of all time. It's right up there with those 5 seasons of Angel, and I kind of struggle every day, like saying, do I like Arrow more? But yeah, I often say Arrow is not really a superhero show,
right?
But it is a comic book show.
Absolutely,
comic book soap opera.
Yeah, and Everett, damn man, I just gotta stop, man. You in that camera, it's like night and day from the old podcast, man. I feel like I'm watching like an interview on like a live sportscast.
I know.
Your picture is just such high quality. That's awesome.
It's just my Nova shirt.
Or it's like watching a Christopher Nolan movie. Like,
yeah.
So Brett, I want to ask you, or maybe just throw it out. You mentioned how you felt like the production quality is so much higher on Daredevil. And that's good. I don't want to take anything away from the show, but I guess the one thing that I thought of that occurred to me when you said that is it kind of should be, right? And maybe this is just a thing to discuss, what should our expectations be of these Netflix shows versus something on network TV? I mean, when you're doing Arrow, you are, unfortunately, you are in that TV season cycle, right? You've got X number of weeks to do your shoots, and then you've got to be done. Whereas Netflix should have a little more flexibility because they're not hardwired into any concept of a premiere date for a season, and sweeps in April and May and Nielsen ratings and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, it's good to hear it's high quality, but then again, I guess maybe just as an aside, I kind of feel like it should be.
Yeah, let's just before you speak, Brad, let's not lie to ourselves and pretend like the CW doesn't try to cater to a younger audience as well as an older one, whereas the Netflix is strictly for older people.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like kind of, and Agastocles brings up a good, valid point, but it's kind of like comparing apples to oranges with Netflix and the CW. Even though CW is owned by CBS and Warner Brothers own the CW network, which is where the CW comes from. But the better comparison is something between like what Flash and Arrow do, or Flash compared to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is a mainstream ABC
Right.
show. I'm
Mm-hmm.
blown away. I write that Flash review for our site, and I'm blown away each week about what they're able to accomplish on that show compared to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which I just assume, maybe I'm wrong in my thinking, probably has a bigger budget, and they don't seem to do as much with it. Whereas, yes, it's kind of not fair to compare maybe a CW show to Netflix, where it's subscription based and
Yeah.
it's like HBO quality content that we've come to expect from House of Cards and Orange is the New Black and shows like that.
Let's
Just
before.
one comment. Flash is good, but I do get tired of CGI Flash.
Yeah.
I get tired of like when they slow him down so much that that he looks like Neo from like he looks like the CG Neo from the Matrix.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the
Yeah.
fact that we have that on TV now is
Right,
still
right.
pretty cool. I mean, but
Yeah.
I know
Well,
we want to save some for that Daredevil mini cast, right, Everett?
right, but I do want to bring up, since we're already, all of us, I think, going to talk about Arrow and Flash. I do want to bring up, since you brought up Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., how weird it would be if any Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. character appeared in Daredevil. Because, like, they're supposed to be in the same universe. They mentioned Thor, Captain America. I feel like they probably mentioned there's a few other Easter eggs in Daredevil, but it feels so disconnected from S.H.I.E.L.D.
I think Ward would fit in nicely there, just going around killing people left and right. I don't know. I'm just joking there, but yeah, it does feel different.
I
Well,
just feel like if Skye showed up or if Coulson showed up in Daredevil, it would be so strange.
there's two. I think there's two maybe interesting conversational threads there. Is one, do we jump to this thing of what Netflix is going to call the Defenders
Right.
intermixing with the Avengers. But then the other interesting conversational thread, and this is the whole difference between DC's approach and Marvel's, where DC is going to look to all of its films having a very similar kind of cinematic feel, whereas in Marvel, each of those franchises, cinematically, visually, there's room and space for things to look different. So kind of the Avengers core kind of have the same kind of stylistic approach, but as you start to get into these other peripheral Marvel properties that are going to go on, Daredevil looks much more like Arrow um, or a
Yeah.
or a weekly Batman show, and for Marvel, that's fine. They're fine with that differentiation.
Uh,
So it's just
I,
interesting the two different takes.
Uh, just one to comment on that. I think that's a reflection of the companies both in the comic book world and in the film and TV world. You look at something like the DC, the New 52, they have a very house art style, which I know comic book readers are familiar with that term. Basically, all the characters look the same across the books, a very like
So
in-house art style. And then Marvel, you look at something like CK just reviewed Miss Marvel, and then compare that to Steve McNiven's Inhumans, which looks very cinematic. It's different feel and look across the board. So I think Marvel's movies and TV shows represent that company, whereas like Agasicles says, excuse me, try not to mess that name up. They have a very uh, similar tone the DC films do.
yeah, I completely
Uh,
agree with your characterization of that.
well, let's move on from that. CK, is there any part of those offensive reality shows that you want to talk about before we move on?
I guess they're not necessarily offensive in and of themselves, but it was a really horrifying amount of them. I've taken to binge watching a lot of Food Network shows on Netflix. There's a ton of new stuff available if you love Food Network shows, which apparently I do. That was a new discovery for me, which was horrifying. And The Voice is on Hulu. I'm a sucker for like talent competitions because I'm maybe American Idol. So if you, like me, are easily suckered in by people doing things that you could passably do exceptionally well and then winning prizes that will probably not really do anything for them like 5 years down the road, you should check out The Voice. There's a lot of talented people. So yeah, that was probably the bulk of my offensive reality TV show watching. It was not Daredevil, but it's hard to watch Daredevil in an office environment. It's a little less weird when you explain to your boss why you're like watching Dancing with the Stars during Disney Week than it is to watch Charlie Cox beat people up in the streets.
Oh. All right, thanks, CK. Let's move on to you, Agaskles. What have you been watching this week besides Daredevil and Flash and Arrow?
So I haven't actually been watching Daredevil, and I won't get into it, but but I have actually been catching up on Arrow and the Flash. So I think one of your criticisms of me during my last tour of duty with Geeks with Wives was that I wasn't caught up. So during my sabbatical, I tried to really prepare myself for my return. So I am completely caught up on Arrow. I have watched all the first 2 seasons and the 3rd season to date. Although I haven't watched this week's episode. And Flash, I'm not quite caught up on. I've watched the first, I think, 4 episodes of the Flash, so still catching up on that.
I feel like they do a little bit, like with the CGI Flash, they do a little bit better in some of the later episodes.
Yeah. I guess the one interesting point on that is, when I was here before, we used to always talk about, Flash, Arrow, which one is better, which was always kind of a difficult conversation to have, and now having seen enough of both of them. At least the last time I talked to you, you were of the feeling that Flash was the better show. My feeling is I personally like Arrow more.
I think I'm on the Arrow team now. Like I switch.
Okay.
But every week I like to kind of have a competition between the two. And this week I feel like the 2 new episodes were pretty even. But I've been, you're so attached to the Arrow characters after 3 seasons that it's hard to compete.
And I think, I'm sorry.
They're just to me, they're Batman and Superman on TV, right? Arrow is Batman and Flash is Superman. One's the light, one's the dark, 2 different sides to the same coin. And they basically said, all right, we can't use Batman and Superman on TV, so we're going to make Batman and Superman through allegories here. And it's awesome, I think. But
and I was going to say, I personally like Arrow more. I feel like Flash is the more uplifting show. Like it's just a much more it's like you finish watching an episode of Flash and you feel good. You kind of bob your head and kind of dance and skip around your house. But when you watch Arrow, you're just like, ooh, dude, that was rough. So.
Without spoiling anything, there's an episode, you'll probably get to it in 3 or 4 episodes, but there's one episode of Flash that ended that left me just so unsettled.
Really? I do frequently cry during an episode of Flash when all the family stuff. I'm like, dude, come on, man, don't do that to me.
Now I want to know which episode you're talking about.
Sorry.
I'll send you a Skype, CK. You'll know what I'm talking about. I don't want to ruin it for a guest, please.
The last thing I'll say on that comparison is the other thing I'd say about those 2 shows is I feel like, and you kind of said something similar to this, Everett, where you talked about kind of how Arrow does such a great job of kind of like winding and coiling everything up in this kind of big ramp up to the season finale. And I like Arrow. If I were going to look at individual episodes of those 2 shows, I feel like Flash consistently has better individual episodes, but the whole element of like a whole season long arc that's like integrated into a singular cohesive story, which is what I used to love about the Angel TV series. I feel like Arrow does better seasons so far, as a collection. But if I had to watch like a single episode of something, I'd probably watch The Flash.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, well, if there's nothing else you want to get to, let's just move on to you real quick, Brad. We are running long in what we watched this week, and we got a lot to cover.
All right, I'll just talk about one thing real quick. I finally saw the Kevin Spacey film directed by Sam Mendes, American Beauty, that won Best Picture, I believe, in 2000. And this is when he won Best Actor. And for being one of the most depressing movies probably ever made, it's very powerful and get what you take what you want from it. But basically, here's a guy, I mean, this is a 14, 15-year-old movie at this point, who just says, I'm going to live my life to the fullest and not give a crap about what anybody else thinks. And, gives up his career and goes to working in a fast food restaurant and just living the life. And it really hit me because you work so hard to get where you're at in your careers, going to college, get married, meet goal A, B, and C. And then you look back once you're there and you're like, all the times I wish I was here, like those times when I was making $200 every 2 weeks working at Chick-fil-A or whatever in high school, those were some pretty damn good times. So like, why not just enjoy that, So enjoy it, kids, enjoy it. But American Beauty, 10 out of 10, lives up to all the hype. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it.
Yeah, I have. It had nudity in it, and I was quite young when I saw it, so I enjoyed it. All right. Thanks, Brad. I'm just going to go through mine just super quick. I flew to the United States last week. That's why we were off, and so I had a whole airplane's ride from Europe to the U.S. worth of movies to watch. I watched every single episode of Daredevil in the time that I could without making the people that I was visiting feel like I was stuck in a room watching Daredevil. And so I watched like two episodes real late at night and then woke up real early to watch an episode. And I got through all 13 and just absolutely loved it. I'm going to do it again. I watched Birdman with
I want to see it.
Michael Keaton. I don't know. I might have went into the movie with the wrong impression. I didn't enjoy it that much. The cool thing about the film is that it's basically filmed in one giant take. Like it's just a camera that follows people around this theater, and it's really hard to tell where the cuts are, but it's incredible how long some of the cuts obviously are, with Michael Keaton just acting and playing this role. And I think that's what makes that film so tremendous, is that it's just one take. I'm caught up on Flash and Arrow. Loved it. Flash, without ruining anything for Gascles, is getting exciting. It's getting darker. I can't wait for more crossovers. Arrow, I'm loving Brandon Routh in that show. And this new episode was just pretty much all Brandon Routh, which you can find my review of that episode with spoilers and non-spoilers. There's a whole paragraph of non-spoilers on geekswithwives.com. And then lastly, I watched Jerry Seinfeld's short web show called Coffee with Comedians in Cars. Have you guys heard of that?
Yeah.
It's hilarious. I watched the episode with Alec Baldwin and with, oh Christ, I'm blanking on names now, Ricky Gervais. And there was one more I watched, but they're pretty funny. I hope he's not making like millions off of it. It is just a web show. It's just, it's a couple cameras.
That's Jerry Seinfeld. Millions of dollars.
Yeah, I mean, he's genuinely funny, and if you want to see Ricky Gervais get freaked out by Jerry Seinfeld's driving, go watch that, because he looks like he's about to shit himself in some of those scenes. And then I've watched like a million other things, but I probably don't want to talk about them. So let's move on to the main topic. This week we're talking about book adapted movies and TV shows, book adaptations. I wrote down a whole list here of things that you guys can all look through, but we're not really going to go through them and name them out. So my first question for you three is, are book adaptations better as a movie or a TV show, and why?
I think it kind of depends on the film, which is such a terrible non-committal answer that nobody will enjoy that. But yeah, I don't know. I think that there are books that can work really well as movies. Most of the Harry Potter books, I think a couple of them probably would have been better left unadapted, but I guess you can't with a book series.
You mean Prisoner of Azkaban? That movie was awesome.
I know. I love that movie. It is great, but a difficult movie to make, I feel like. But I think they did the best they could.
That put Alfonso Cuarón like on the map, like directing Prisoner of Azkaban. So I that's like my favorite Harry Potter movie, probably.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Like
That's the one that everyone has problems with, though.
Yeah.
I know.
It's just so difficult because it's a great movie, but if you're looking at it from I don't know, if you're going into these movies saying to yourself, I like Harry Potter films, this will be fun, then I think you come out of it and you're like, oh man, what a great movie. But if you go into it as a fan of the books, and you're looking for something that's really true, like almost like verbatim true to the book, you come out of it and you're like, like what a disappointment, which is, I think, unfair to the film because it's a difficult book to translate to an hour and a half to 2 hours. And
I thought Order of the Phoenix was the one that most people had the biggest problem with because wasn't that the longest book and then the shortest movie and they cut a lot of stuff out? Was it Prisoner of Azkaban? Did people have a lot of problems with that? That's the third one, right?
They had a
Mhm.
lot of plot holes in that movie that
Okay.
they could have filled but didn't.
Yeah, I read the books and saw the movie. It's been a while since I've been into Harry Potter big time, but
Yeah, and
Well,
here's the thing I was going to say. I think Game of Thrones is like probably the perfect example of this. I guess I feel like the more complex the story and maybe in particular the cast, the more the book needs the TV show treatment just to have the episodic orientation of the content and longer duration and time to kind of let
right.
things breathe. I think I call out Game of Thrones because I think that's the one people are most familiar with in today's time. But the one that sticks out to me, from my childhood or younger years, is Frank Herbert's Dune, which did not work well as a movie if you had not read the book. Um, but then, if you read the book, a lot of the abstractions of the movie, the way they tried to render things to make it make sense to people, even though it's not really what the book represented, were problematic. But if you look at the sci-fi channel version of Dune, which was like I think a
It was,
three-episode miniseries,
yeah, and each
um,
episode was 2 hours.
2 hours, right, right. That to me was a much better treatment that communicated the actual
Yeah.
story content of that book.
Yeah, I agree with that. I wanted to talk about Dune just because of the whole difference in the length between the movie and that miniseries. But it seems like for most movies, especially nowadays, they're realizing that you need 2 movies per book. And we're seeing that mainly in the last book. Like you got Mockingjay 1 and 2, and then you had Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows 1 and 2, and then you have, all these last books they're doing in 2, and then The Hobbit got 3 movies, which The Hobbit's like a 90-page book, or
Right, and
which is crazy.
that's why I have a problem with that approach. Is I don't know. I haven't kind of settled on whether or not that's really just becoming a trope. That I mean,
Yeah,
so first of all, I was turned off by the concept of the Hobbit because I've kind of felt like, I mean, great Scott, like the 9 to 10 hours of freaking footage of the 3 Lords of the Rings movies. I was like, do we really need a Hobbit movie? Seriously, do we
right.
uh,
really need that? And then for him to then break them down into 3 movies, I was just like, that's preposterous. Like
with
you
the
don't.
Hobbit, like I think one of the big reasons they did that, they broke because Warner Brothers, the Nolan Batman movies were ending, Lord of the Rings had ended, Harry Potter had ended. That was their last grasp at their big tentpole franchise. And it was before they launched the DC cinematic universe with Man of Steel that they wanted to milk that for every ounce of blood that was left in that turnip,
Yeah.
to quote an old Southern cliche. But
And that's my problem with it is, are you breaking the last book down into 2 movies or any number of books into 2 movies for business reasons, or is it really because that's the best model for the storytelling? Because if it's not the best thing for the storytelling, then I'm not interested in it. And I have not gone to see The Hobbit. I have no interest in seeing The Hobbit, even when it's free on Netflix. I'm just not going to invest 6 hours plus of my life after having already gone through Lord of the Rings to see, kind of like Everett said, a 90-page book. Which a bit of hyperbole there, but but to see a relatively short book rendered across 6 to 8 hours, on screen, I'm like, that's just ridiculous.
But it's got Legolas in it. I'm just kidding. Yeah, so I just to touch on you guys' point, like I feel like what they did, especially with Harry Potter, is they were like, all right, so we've got these really popular movies, and we're getting a lot of shit because the last 2 or 3 movies that we've made have been just horrible, and people are saying that we're not adapting the books well enough. So we need to do like really good on the last book and just turn it into 2. Like two and a half, 2 hours isn't long enough for a book, so we need to stretch that into 6 hours max to try and cover one book. And I feel like that's what they're ending up having to do. Like, Lord of the Rings was a 3-hour movie for a massive book, whereas The Hobbit is a 9-hour movie for, you know, they give like 10 pages or whatever per movie. But like, I feel like, so it's between 6 hours and Game of Thrones 10 hours. And so that's almost like a whole Lord of the Rings and a half of movie that you know, one book misses out on. Whereas Lord of the Rings, you know, yeah, they're spending 2 seasons on one book, but they're still missing so much stuff. And they've already caught up to George R. R. Martin. And so basically, I'm just going to segue into my next point with this, is that Game of Thrones has become kind of a monster.
Yeah.
It's gone on too fast. They were too ambitious, and now they're doing something that no other adaptation has really done in the same way, is that the 2 showrunners, they know where George R. R. Martin's kind of headed. George R. R. Martin kind of gave him his notes. He hasn't really finalized the notes, you know, or else he would have had the books out by now. But the show's going to start spoiling the books.
Right, because the show at this point is actually beyond what he's written. Is that accurate?
Or they're right there at it, right?
Okay.
Well, some of the characters are right there at it. Some of the characters are behind, but some of the characters, for people that didn't know, the first 4 episodes got leaked online. And being me, I went and watched them all.
Shame on you.
Well,
Shame
I like to watch Game of Thrones all in one chunk. Like, I'd rather just have a Saturday where my fiance's gone and I have nothing to do, and I just watch 10 hours straight of Game of Thrones. That makes me happy. But with just 4 episodes and a long plane ride, I was like, I'm just going to watch this. Some of the characters have already started spoiling the 6th book, and I don't want it to spoil the book for me.
So do you quit now, Everett? Like,
I think I'm going to have to. Yes, I think I'm going to have to quit Game of Thrones until the 6th book comes out, which is a shame because I'm probably going to miss out on 2 seasons. The benefit is once I finish that book, I'll be able to like binge 2 seasons worth of Game of Thrones. But then how long is it going to be until they're into book 7?
Yeah, I just think, like you said, it's become its own monster. The showrunners, was it Benny and Weisenhoff, or that's the 2 last names, I think, of those showrunners, that the show has almost become so big at this point, it's its own separate, like, entity. Right. And, like, they met with George R. R. Martin. They know where the destination is going, but they're going to take a different path to get to that destination, to get to that end for those characters. So I think it's just up to the discretion of how you want to digest it. Do you want to see the showrunner's interpretation, or do you want to see the original writer's interpretation? And for us show watchers, it's going to be the show. For you, I think that's the right decision.
See, so my question is, should they be faithful to the book or just interpretations? Because Game of Thrones' first season is almost identical to the book. There's a few dream sequences they left out, probably because they thought it would be tacky, but they're quite important to the main story. But, you know, I digress. But I feel like they've become less and less faithful to the books, and they've started mashing characters and scenes together, and that's caused them to move much faster, which is probably their goal. They want the show to move faster and be more exciting than the books, because the books go pretty slow. And that's just caused them to move way ahead. Do you guys think that books should try their best to be faithful, or should they pick and choose, or should they just be like artistic interpretations of a source material?
I feel like Game of Thrones is such a weird set of circumstances for that, though, because the books are so long to begin with. I mean, they're massive books. There's a lot of content there. And George R. R. Martin produces the books at relatively slow pace compared to what we expect from a lot of other folks who write like
6 years a
blockbuster
book.
series. Yeah, which is given the amount of content in the books, that's understandable. I can't rag on anybody for writing a book that big in that span of time. Um, but for a television show, like it's inevitable that they're going to hit a point where they have no material left, so to speak, because they have to produce at a much faster pace. And I don't think that they necessarily do have an obligation to be like verbatim faithful, both because there's so much content there that it would become almost tedious to slog through in a weekly format, and because ultimately like you anticipate that the show will be so successful that it will literally never get canceled, but they have it can happen for whatever reason. It could happen, and what happens if you're only, you've become so faithful to the book that you're only a fraction of the way through any plot line, and now your show is ending, and you literally can't wrap it up because there's no way to move fast enough if you want to be that faithful. Um, so, like in a perfect world, I think the books would be fairly faithful. For me, I'm pretty flexible on like matching characters or storylines or kind of mix and mashing based on like the constraints of your production or the length of your season or whatever.
Okay.
For me, it's more about being like tonally faithful. I have to admit, I don't watch Game of Thrones and I haven't read the books yet because I'm a binge watcher. But for me, if I went into it having read the books and then started watching the series, if they got to a point where there was no content left for them and they had to kind of like do whatever it took to get to the end result of the series, if it seemed sort of tonally faithful to what I imagined the book would wind up being like when it was published, I think that would be good for me because ultimately, like, I'm not listening to like a BBC radio adaptation that can take as long as it wants, and it can basically just be people reading from the books as different characters. Like, I'm watching a show.
What's going to be funny with Game of Thrones is that right now, not so much anymore now that they've caught up, but at the start of the show, people would spoil and be like, psh, if you didn't know that, you need to read the books. Well, like in a year, it's going to be like, psh, if you didn't know that spoiler, you need to watch the show. Yeah, and I mean, the show people are going to start spoiling for the books. It's going to be the ultimate revenge, and it's going to be horrible. Because my whole thing is I don't want to ruin the book because I find the books ultimately more enjoyable, and then seeing how they're translated onto the screen. But I was going to mention Lord of the Rings, I guess, please, because you seem to feel quite strong about those movies. How do you think his interpretation of those movies went?
I thought those movies were interpreted greatly from the book to the big screen. What I was going to say about this topic generally is first of all, admit that my opinion, you got to call me a complete hypocrite because I'm not consistent. Because for books, I generally say it's an interpretation. So, like the comic book fans who get, no, we said books, we may have kind of.
Well, we can touch on comics. It's
right, because you had Walking Dead on the list, but. But like the comic book fans who get like very wrapped around the axle if like the comic book storyline isn't like representative of what actually happened in the paper version, like that doesn't bother me. I will say, so story wise, I feel like it's an interpretation. I will say my threshold that torques me off is the character mashup. I do not like when they take like in the Marvel movies have been, well, I'll say the Iron Man franchise in particular, because I already don't like that franchise. And part of the reason I don't like it is because they do that character mashup crap. They take, two villains and merge and mash them up and make them into a singular villain. It just irks me. It irks me primarily because it's not necessary and it doesn't lend to the storyline.
Trevor Slattery.
Was that the third movie?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, That's.
I know Whiplash was kind of like
right.
He was kind of a mix of a couple different characters from the Iron Man. I think with talking about like comic book interpretations, I've kind of matured and started writing about these things and looking further into it. I used to be the kid that read all the comics. It was like, you have to do a Venom movie, just argument's sake, talk about Spider-Man, this way. Eddie Brock has to work at the Bugle and he has to pump iron and get pissed off at Spider-Man. Whereas like, Then I watched the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I watched the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, and I see them have Harry Osborn become Venom. And I'm like, wow, this is a really cool interpretation here. If this happened on the big screen, it would have a lot of stakes. And I don't know if I would get that upset about it because I think ultimately you have to trust the creator's discretion that you're putting in charge of the property. And I think with Game of Thrones guys, you're getting the best of both worlds with the show. Because from what I've heard, the latter books is where they begin to kind of deteriorate quality wise. Not that they're terrible books, just they're not as strong as the first couple books, and Everett can speak to that point better than I ever could. But they're getting you to the destination that Martin wants the characters, but they're able to give you their interpretation of that journey to that destination, and you're still going to get George R. R. Martin's take with the books.
Right. Yeah, the books get way slower later on. Like every time I'd hit a Daenerys chapter, and so in the later books, I just skim through it because it's so boring. What do you guys think about spin-offs of books? Like Dexter, the first season was the first Dexter book, but then the rest of the season doesn't resemble anything. Like the Bourne movies, the first one was pretty close to the original Bourne Identity book, but the other movies didn't resemble the books that had the same name. What do you guys think of spin-offs of books? Are you okay with that? Are you okay with directors and writers kind of doing their own thing once they get the franchise off the ground?
Like just taking characters, like creating their own Bourne stories that weren't Bourne books.
Right. Because the last two Bourne movies, and of course the one with Renner, they don't resemble anything.
Which I couldn't stand the one with Renner. I love Jeremy Renner, but I don't know. It wasn't a Bourne movie to me, and that's not just because Matt Damon wasn't in it. But I think if you're true to the character tonally, that's what matters in that case.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of extending universes, right? Like it's definitely an acceptable argument to say, the books tell a story and that content exists, right? In its space on paper. And if we're going to do a movie, let's take where the last book ended and just, take off. And I love when Whedon does it in reverse, right? Like he did, his seasons of Buffy and his seasons of Angel, and now there are comic books that extend that universe. And the show has stopped, and there's no attempt to reboot a show or make a movie, but he's just telling that story. He and his teams that he collaborates with in comic book form, and I think that that's great. And I'd be completely open for one of my bad points is that I actually like the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Oh wow!
The movie.
The movie, just because I'm a huge fan of taking that literary content and extending those universes that those characters existed in on paper and taking them and making it into something different on the big screen. And I know there was a graphic novel or whatever for it too, but just from the movie perspective, yeah.
So let's try and move on here. I've got a few more little points here that I wanted to get through before we go on to the news. Should book adaptation movies or shows try to please everyone, or can they, or do they? It's a pretty simple question. It should just be no, right? They can't.
Yeah, I think that's a no on all counts.
But do you think they should even try, or should they just...
No, I don't think so. I mean, ultimately, it's impossible. It's literally not possible. You'll walk in a movie, and it'll be the most flawless, tonally great, as close to all of the elements of the story as possible in the constraints of 2.5 hours maximum. It'll be almost perfect, and you'll still walk out of a theater and people will be mad because their one favorite scene with their one favorite character who only speaks 5 lines isn't included in the book, and they're really sad about it.
I was guilty of this, guys. So I watched the Avengers, and this whole thing is perfect. I know this is a comic book thing, and they never say Avengers Assemble, and I'm like, what the hell? Even though they technically assembled, just the fact that they didn't say it, being the comic book geek that I was, I nitpicked this fun joyride of a movie. So I was that asshole that did that.
Right. They'll
Yeah.
do it. They'll probably do it in the next one.
Yeah.
I think they have to be an established team for a while.
What amazes me is, and man, if there's a staple comic book that I grew up on, it was Avengers. That's how I got into comics. I came in through Avengers and Justice League, and I didn't even catch that they didn't say Avengers Assemble in the movie till you mentioned it.
Right. All right. So, yeah, I mean, just to finish off that point, I know Tommy was really mad that 50 Shades of Grey wasn't as graphic as all the housewives were wanting. He wanted all the nudity and the hardcore stuff in that movie, and Fox just wouldn't do it. I don't even know if it was Fox. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. So, one thing about Harry Potter that I found out is that they cast Daniel Radcliffe solely based on him looking like Harry Potter. You think that's cool, or should they like, I put Jack Reacher on here because Tom Cruise is the polar opposite of what Jack Reacher is described as in the books. I'm a massive Jack Reacher fan, and Jack Reacher is like 6'11" and 250 pounds of muscle, whereas Tom Cruise is like 5'7" and like 90 pounds. What do you guys think about casting characters?
I'll go ahead and throw my poker chip down on this just because I've covered this before, but I generally have little to no tolerance for that. I think it's very awesome when characters are cast as different ethnicities or different genders or whatever. If it again kind of extends that universe and that story beyond what it originally was. If you're a Battlestar Galactica fan, I'm sure you lived through people like raging about Starbuck being a woman, and by the time that series was over, she was absolutely, unquestionably one of the most adored characters on that show. And I'm just like, get over it. Like the whole thing about Rue in the Hunger Games being cast as an African American female, people flipped out about that, and I'm like, I don't think in the book it ever says that she's a white female. Like, I'm just like, it's an interpretation. Get over it and accept the diversity and the variation. Although, but I do insist that Batman should be a tall person with broad shoulders, so that bugs me.
The only thing with that point of Gasicles is cast the best person available for your, interpretation, what race, gender, diversity and everything, but don't do it just to grab a headline. I feel like sometimes so many, I'm mainly talking back to comic books here with this kind of progressive age we're in. We're having this all new Avengers team, and there's going to be a black Captain America and a black Spider-Man and a female Thor. It's like, okay, like that is the marketing of your book. It isn't the story. It isn't the writer. It's the gender and ethnicity of your characters. Like, I realize that's a big deal as far as maybe news media, but the company is pushing it in that way. And I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
But to be fair, the story of Captain America is also pretty deeply rooted in Isaiah Bradley, the first quote-unquote black Captain America, who's the product of something pretty similar to like the actual historical Tuskegee experiments. So I think a lot of these things are rooted in storylines that have happened previously. But because it's the first time these things are being presented as like modern stories, it reads a lot differently.
I feel like it's because they're pointing it out.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't have a problem with, just let me clarify, I don't have a problem with Sam Wilson being Captain America or a female Thor or whatever. I love Miles Morales. I've got every single issue of that comic, and he's an awesome Spider-Man. But it's that I realize you do that, it's going to catch news headlines because it's different, it's brand new, but it's that the name of this Avengers title is all new, all different Avengers. Why can't it just be the Avengers?
Yeah.
You see my point, guys?
Although, to be fair, Marvel applies that label to everything.
Everything's all new.
You're right, exactly.
Well, like, I know, just moving back to Game of Thrones, that they cast all of the Stark children. I'm not sure if it was out of necessity or acting skills or what. All the Stark children were 5 years younger in the books than they were in the show, and I'm not sure if they just wanted a higher level of acting, or what? Because well, yeah, Daenerys was supposed to be 13.
Yeah. So I think if you're going to put that show on television, you have to you had to definitely age Daenerys, because I don't think it would have been acceptable to see her being
raped by Khal Drogo.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I got your line of thought there, but like now, like especially with Bran and with Arya, those kids are like almost 19 years old or 18 now. I mean, Arya looks huge, and they have to, Sansa's like 6-something feet tall, and it's just crazy because the books don't cover that much time. And originally, George R. R. Martin did like a 5 years later storyline in between some of the books, but he took that out. But yeah, I just I don't know. Like they just to move on to the news, just one tiny bit of news and then running back. Olivia Munn as Psylocke. There was quite mixed reaction of that.
Oh, well, I like Olivia Munn as an actress. I think she kind of burnt up some cred in the geek community, where a lot of people found out that she really didn't care about these properties and video games as much as she let on when she was on G4. So whenever people in the geek community talk about Olivia Munn, I try to take it with a grain of salt, because there's a little bias there.
I know a lot of people were like, she's not even Asian. I'm like, are you kidding me?
She's partially Asian, right?
She's half Japanese, and she's fluent in Japanese. So she's like really good mix for Psylocke. And I made the point in our group chat that if Fox had the rights, which they don't, for Captain Britain, she'd be absolutely perfect. Because Captain Britain, she's supposed to be, they could do away with the cloning thing and just say she's half British.
I think I like it. I say that I don't have a lot of tolerance for people who rage about casting that doesn't match like their physical imagery of that character. However, I do think it's good when, for the right reasons, it does match your image of the character. So I like the casting just because I think she'll be able to be made to look like Psylocke. Mm-hmm. My only concern is I don't think she's the deepest actress, and Psylocke is a very complex character, both intellectually and emotionally. It just depends on how much, I also anticipate that she's not going to play that big of a role in that film, so she'll probably get by okay.
She's a fan service.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but to her credit, like I'm pretty ambivalent towards Olivia Munn for no particular reason. But I also obsessively watched The Newsroom, which was terrible. But she was probably the best part of that for me. I think she was really good. And
are you saying The Newsroom was terrible?
I am saying The Newsroom was terrible. It's terrible.
Oh my god!
It's a terrible show. It's a terrible show, and Aaron Sorkin did bad, and he should feel bad.
You're off the podcast.
Nope. I am so aggressively right about that.
Oh no.
Well, just subjectively, my opinion.
I'm putting you in the timeout corner.
But she was great. She was probably my favorite part of that show from week to week. She did a really great job on that.
But okay, so let's just finish off this main topic because we're taking way too long here. We're close to an hour in, so which is okay. I just wanted to go through and get you guys' favorite book adapted movie or show. Just one. So we'll start with you, Brad.
Just right off the top of my head, does it need to obviously be a book that I've read and then saw the TV? Because I love Game of Thrones. That's probably off the top of my head. But Harry Potter's the books I read, and I enjoyed all the films as a franchise as a whole, which I know is the most cliche answer, but
that's all I'm aiming for. I figured you would say Twilight, but man. All right, so Gascles, what's your favorite?
Time to think about it. Man, I don't know. It's kind of a jumbled mix between Game of Thrones, The Walking Dead. I guess I'll say that Sci-Fi Channel version of Dune. I think because for me, life-wise, nostalgia-wise, I'd read the book. I read that book as a teenager. Saw the movie. I enjoyed the movie, but for my best friend to get anything out of it, I had to see it with him and kind of interpret it for him as the movie was going. but he loved the sci-fi miniseries. Because it got across everything in the book, and so it was kind of a redemption miniseries for me. So I'll go with that one as my favorite.
Did you watch, just before we move on? Did you watch Children of Dune?
I did not. I have.
It has all the same actors.
Yeah, I may have. That one doesn't stick with me as much.
Okay.
But yeah.
What about UCK?
I have to kind of agree with Bradley a little bit. Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix is probably my favorite book adaptation ever. I love that movie. But I also have really fond feelings for a series of unfortunate events, which I think a lot of people kind of slipped on. If you don't know the series, it's a book series by Lemony Snicket. It's surprisingly morbid for a series of books about children. And the movie got kind of mixed reviews, but I liked it. It was, again, one of those things where it's not like truly literal, and it mixed up a lot of elements from the first three books, but tonally speaking, it was spot on.
Okay.
I have one question because I think this would be a good segue in the news ever. All right, with the Star Wars movie coming out now, when the Star Wars movies are released, they always release the book, the novelization of it, and the novelization for the Star Wars films are always they're big deals because they fill in a lot of details and character gaps that are maybe not in the movies. And if you never read them, I recommend going back and reading them if you can find the time. How do you guys?
Empire.
Well, how do you guys feel about like reading the novelization of something either before or after? And there's a lot of people who are really debating whether or not they're going to read the novelization of Force Awakens before it comes out because it's going to come out a month before the movie comes out.
I'm glad you brought this up because I forgot to write this in my notes because when I was a much younger man, I read the novelization of the first X-Men movie before the movie came out. And no, that book is fantastic, and the movie greatly disappointed me.
That's why I say ouch, because I think
yeah,
I won't say for certain, but like I enjoyed the first movie. Thought the second movie was better. So if there's an argument that the first movie was a good movie, it's a shame that it got ruined for you by the novelization.
No, the novelization was far greater than the film. Okay. There was so much more depth and background to all the characters that I feel like I might want to read the Star Wars book.
I'm sorry, Ever. I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize.
It's cool.
The reason is, all right, like Revenge of the Sith, as Anakin turns to the dark side, if you read that novelization, you can read what he's thinking in his head as he makes that turn. So, like, if you watch the Clone Wars, which fills in a lot of background, then you read that novelization, it gives so much more added depth to the greatest fall, at least in fictional cinematic history, probably, from good to bad. And so that's why a lot of people are like, I want to read the novelization of The Force Awakens.
So the original trilogy, chapters 4, 5, and 6. I read those as a kid. I always read them after the movie. I will say that that set of books was one of the very few books that I reread several times. So I would go see the movie and I would read the book several times because, like you said, Brad, they fill in gaps and provide additional detail, and that's awesome.
Yeah, I think Star Wars to me is foremost a movie. And so I'll probably go see the movie and then read the book afterward to get that extra tidbit. Whereas Game of Thrones to me is foremost a book. And so I would rather quit Game of Thrones and wait for the book to come out. But just to finish off this segment, for my favorite, I would probably have to go, like, I really, really enjoyed the new Jack Reacher film. Even though Tom Cruise doesn't look like what I envision Jack Reacher to be, I envision more of a Dolph Lundgren, younger Dolph Lundgren.
You're just saying that because you're in Sweden.
No, I'm saying that because after I watched Jack Reacher the movie, I've read 12 or 13 books by Lee Child featuring the character, and that movie had quite an effect on me to the point where I enjoyed it that much. And I've read the book one shot now, and I kind of was dreading reading it. I read it over Thanksgiving of this last year because I had seen the movie, and I was like, if this book's exactly like the movie, I'm not going to enjoy it that much because I've seen the movie like 20 times. And it was nothing like the book. The book is nothing like the movie, and I actually really enjoyed both versions. So I feel like reading the source material after a movie that isn't anything like it kind of added quite a bit to the story for me because it brought up a new version of that story that I greatly enjoyed. So I think that beats out. I would say Game of Thrones, but after watching the first 4 episodes of the new season, I'm kind of disappointed. One last thing to finish off the main topic. I kind of have a game here for you guys, and I've always talked about how fun it would be to do a game on the show. What do you guys think?
Sounds fun.
So we're going to go counterclockwise. I'm not sure if it's the same for you guys. I'm just going to go Gascles, CK, Brad, Gascles, CK, Brad. So starting with you, Gascles, I want you to tell me if this movie that I mention is a book or not. And you can't cheat. Just it's going to be a lightning round, so I'm going to give
my hands are off the keyboard.
I'm going to give you 5 seconds, so we're just going to blow through these. All right, so starting with you, Gascles, and then the CK. Mrs. Doubtfire.
Not a book.
It is a book. All right, CK. Mean Girls.
Book.
It is a book. All right, Brad. Star Wars.
That's not a book.
It's not a book. All right, Gascles. Aliens.
Not a book.
Not a book. All right, CK. Iron Giant.
Book.
It is a book. All right, Brad. Blues Brothers.
No, that's the SNL skit. Not a book.
It's not a book. All right, Gascles. Precious.
That is a book.
It is a book. Good job. All right, CK. Jaws.
Book.
It is a book.
It's like, that sounds like it could be by Michael Crichton.
Yeah.
Peter Benchley.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so Brad, let's see, where was I? The Matrix.
Movie.
Yeah, it's not a book.
Not a book.
Gascles, Gladiator.
Not a book.
You're correct. CK, Friday Night Lights.
Book.
It is a book. Brad, When Harry Met Sally.
Book.
Nope, not a book. Gascles, He's Just Not That Into You.
Not a book.
That is not a book. CK, Bambi.
Not a book.
It's a book.
That's a book.
All right.
No.
Brad, Mad Max.
Not a book.
It's not a book. Gascles, Pitch Perfect.
Not a book.
It's a book.
Oh,
Imagine
right.
that, a musical that's based on a book. CK, Die Hard.
Not a book.
It's a book.
My God.
Really?
Yeah,
By a different name, right? It's,
by a different name. I think it's like a good... Live
Day.
Free-
It's not a good day to die hard. That's like
Yeah.
the name of one of the movies.
It's like dying isn't easy. I don't know. It's something. All right, so Brad, I think we were on you. Shrek
Not a book.
is based on a book.
Okay.
Gascles, Donnie Darko.
Book.
Nope, not a book.
Okay.
CK, Tron.
Not a book.
It's not a book. Brad, last one, Forrest Gump.
It's a book.
That's a book. Good job. I think we got all those but like 3 or 4.
At least you didn't say Jurassic Park. I kept waiting for that softball right there.
Oh, I know it. A lot of people wanted us to mention Jurassic Park, so yeah. That's another movie that spins off of a book. But yeah, we'll move on. I just wanted to have a little bit of fun. We'll move on to the news. You guys wanted to mention the Star Wars 7 trailer. I didn't want to talk about it too much because the Capes crew talked about it at length on their podcast. So are you guys excited for it?
Is the sky blue? Is
I
the
agree.
beach joyous? I mean, of course.
Yeah, I agree with most of everything they said on the Capes crew. Like the scene where they're driving in the desert and you got the Star Destroyer just crash in the background is incredible.
And it's on a
Yeah.
planet called, I think, Jaka. It's not on Tatooine.
That'll be good. Yeah.
Uh,
I, I thought it was interesting that the trailer just went ahead and revealed that the African American guy, who's the first guy you see in the first trailer in the stormtrooper outfit, is now
John Boyega.
yeah is now clearly a good guy who was, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
undercover or something. I thought it was an interesting choice to just go ahead and give that away. I thought they were going to kind of keep that under their hat till the
What I
movie.
what I would like to see with him is a different scene where he's not pulling his helmet off and breathing really hard. Both trailers we've seen, he's like,
Covered in sweat.
yeah, he's covered in sweat, and I'm like, damn, dude, this guy must run a lot.
Well,
But
like since we talked about it last night, and I'm not going to repeat myself, but I've done some more reading, and they've revealed some things because Celebration is going on, and we have some Geeks with Wives at Star Wars Celebration in Anaheim right now. And they
Yeah.
said, so now the Empire has evolved into what we call the First Order, which is a even more fascist version, if that's possible, of the Galactic Empire. And the Stormtrooper redesign is because they're actually hitting targets now. Like they're going to be more notorious. There's like a flame trooper who they burn people alive. And it just sounds like, I mean, I know it's dark
be
and
dark.
grittier, but it does sound like it's going to be very dark. And Kylo Ren looks awesome, and the Rebels are now called the Resistance. So we're home. I mean, that summed it up. We talked about it last night.
I'm excited about that silver, like, Cylon stormtrooper.
Oh yeah.
And everybody
What
thinks
looks-
it's Gwendolyn Christie from Game of Thrones.
That'd be
What-
cool. Just before you, sorry to interrupt you guys,
No, go
please.
ahead.
They originally said that silver stormtrooper is going to be one of the main bad guys. Like instead, like you're going to have the Sith with the funky lightsaber, where he's probably going to chop his own hand off.
Kylo
But-
Ren.
Yeah, but then you've also got this like just crazy elite like ex bounty hunter, like now silver stormtrooper, badass as like the main bad guy, and that's going to be really cool.
Well, every time I see the X-wings with the S-foil spread in atmosphere, like those shots are just amazingly beautifully cinematic. Those are
Yeah.
just I can't. That's one scene that I can't wait to see in the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Especially on an IMAX screen, too, if you have the opportunity.
Yeah.
I hope I get to see that movie early, just like I can Avengers 2, because I can't wait for that.
It's Star Wars. Like I said, Avengers is superheroes, and it's a huge part of my life, and I love it. But Star Wars is just something different, and if you're into it, usually is at the top of your geek heart.
All right, well, let's move on. There's kind of some speculation about Guardians 2. They just revealed that the project title, which doesn't mean a whole lot because the project title isn't always the working title, is Guardians 3000. And if you've been paying attention to geekswithwives.com, you'll see that I have been reviewing almost every Guardians 3000 comic that comes out. And they're my absolute favorite comic that has been coming out in the past, like, year. They're so freaking good, and I love the original Guardians team. It's going to be amazing if they advance Astro and Martin X and Starhawk and all of them in Guardians 2. I just can't wait for that. And James Gunn came out and said that the Guardians 2 is going to be a story about fathers at its core, which will be interesting. Because, they mentioned his father at the end of number 1. They kind of teased it. But then James Gunn came out and said a bunch of bullcrap how it's not going to be Jason, who's his father in the comic, which I'd be very disappointed if it wasn't Jason. They might change his name. I don't care about that. But if he's not just like the same character, I'd be pretty disappointed. But
Do you think the plan is to have this older group of Guardians 3000 show up and each one of them is a father to some member of the current Guardians of the Galaxy?
Well, I know that Star-Lord of the 3000 is like the great-great-great-grandson of Star-Lord of our time, And otherwise, I wouldn't think, like, Vance Astro is obviously, he's not related to Cap, but he's got his shield. He's got Cap's shield. And I think the rest of them aren't involved. Like, Yondu was from 3000 originally. So that would be interesting. If they can connect Yondu to the year 3000, I will be in heaven, because I was a little disappointed that Yondu was in the new one and he wasn't from the future. But it would be really cool, because the 3000 Guardians have a huge thing to do with the Michael Korvac saga that's going to basically kick off Battleworld and Secret Wars right now. And they're a very important part, because they exist at the end of all reality.
Now, Secret Wars, you got Convergence. Come on, you don't need to read Secret Wars.
Convergence doesn't even have a Green Lantern comic.
I know.
Come on, don't even tell me.
It does. They have a Green Lantern.
They've got the Green Lantern Corps.
Do they?
I think there's a Parallax comic too.
Is there a Red Lantern comic?
I don't think so.
I'm not reading it then. All right.
I'm being very facetious with that comment.
Bill Pullman and Judd Hirsch are back for Independence Day 2. You guys excited about that at all? Like, I know Will Smith's like one of the only people not returning.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I would love to see Will Smith get on board. I kind of don't understand why he doesn't. I mean, I know he's going to be playing Deadshot here in Suicide Squad. But
I think he wants too much money to return, and they're just like, no, we'll just get Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah, my thing is,
is he in?
I mean,
Yeah.
Okay.
Or Liam, something. I don't know. Keep talking, guys.
Normally I call Will out for that whole thing about, if he's going to be in a movie, then he has to be the star. I'm seeing him start to evolve away from that. First of all, in being in the Suicide Squad, and then two with whatever the recent movie he did, the Khan movie.
Focus.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, he's the headliner in that, but I think the female the actress in that also gets almost nearly equal billing. But I'm kind of not faulting him for this in terms of staying away from it for his own career, because I actually recently watched the original Independence Day on Blu-ray, and number one, that movie holds up really well over time. When you go back and look at like when that movie came out, I was really amazed when I sat there and watched it. But I will say the pattern that's been set over the last year or two is that, if you don't, this concept of having a sequel that comes out like 10, 15, 20 years after the original has not been going well. Like every franchise that's tried to pull that movie has been a flop. And I like Bill Pullman, I like Judd Hirsch. I don't have high confidence for pulling off an Independence Day 4, a decade plus after the original came out.
Jeff Goldblum's in it, right?
I think he's signed back on.
Yeah, I'm in.
Yeah. I'm a Jeff Goldblum fan too. I'm sketchy on this movie though.
The only time I'm okay with what you were saying, Gascles, like the 15 years later sequel, is when the movie is set 15 years later as well. When they're not trying to make it like, this just happened like last year. Like if they're like, it happened 15 years ago and that's why we're all old now, and Will Smith's character died of natural causes or in a car wreck, something like that.
But Tron tried to do that, right? Advance the timeline, and make it in present day. That was not a good thing.
Those are fighting words.
Yeah.
CK and Tyler are both Tron fanatics.
No,
I thought
good
awesome. I usually don't play the age coin, but I would question it. I'll say it may be that it has a different effect if you grew up with and like saw like the original and then sat through the so-called sequel.
You didn't like the dude in Tron?
The second one or the original?
The second one.
I just think the second one.
He was like evil, the dude.
Jeff Bridges.
A big part of my problem with the second Tron is it was very, there were elements of it that were very contrived and tropish in terms of just doing the speeder bikes, and doing some of the other kind of visual stuff from the first one. And like to me, all those things that they rendered that were like the graphics effects from the first one had very little to almost nothing to do with the actual story of the second one.
Yeah.
So that kind of fan service to me didn't really fit. And then the story had all sorts of problems. So, but that's just me.
All right, there's a lot of fighting words going on in this podcast from the newsroom and Tron and all that. All right, so Dominic Cooper, who was Howard Stark in Agent Carter and S.H.I.E.L.D. and Captain America, he's going to be the lead in Preacher, the TV series adaptation of that comic. I know a lot of people are excited about that. I personally haven't read the comic. Wonder Woman will be a character-driven movie. I wrote no shit here because what else are they going to do? Are they going to do like a chauvinistic movie where Wonder Woman needs help from Superman? No, they're going to make it.
They had that whole stuff with the director. Michelle MacLaren left that movie, and then Patty Jenkins, who left Thor 2, is that, which ironically, over creative differences, is now coming in to direct the Wonder Woman movie. With Gal Gadot, so.
Yeah, that'll be exciting. Hawkeye and Maria Hill are going to cameo in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which I've been waiting for Maria Hill to appear on that because she's such an important person in S.H.I.E.L.D. now. So that'll be exciting. I've always liked Colby Smolder's version of Maria Hill. She just needs to cut her hair.
So I have too, and I agree she's an important character in the comics, but, she did the one cameo bit on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. last year, and I just felt like who Colby rendered on screen in that episode was vastly different than what she did on the big screen. Like, it didn't feel like it was the same character, actually.
I actually forgot she was in S.H.I.E.L.D. already. Huh.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why.
Doesn't she, pick up Agent May in a car or something, and that's really all there is to it? If I remember correctly.
She had a super short cameo in Winter Soldier as well, where she saved them.
Yeah, and in that one, again, in Winter Soldier and in the Avengers movie, that felt like the same character. But when she shows up on the screen, it's like they did her scenes on a Saturday or something, and she was off from her real job or something like that. I don't know.
She was probably just filmed How I Met Your Mother. They probably filmed that finale, and she was emotional.
Yeah, I'd love to see Robin as Robin Scherbatsky as Maria Hill.
Me too.
Oh my God! No, okay.
Smoking cigars and.
So Quentin Tarantino just released a Hateful Eight teaser, which I'm excited about. I was pretty upset after seeing Django Unchained to hear that he was doing another Western movie and then have it canceled because the script got leaked. Because he really did well on Django Unchained, and I'd like to see if he could pull another really good Western film out. But yeah, here I wrote the Batman vs. Superman teaser was leaked, but now it's official. What'd you guys think about that?
CK, what'd you think? I have an opinion on it. Don't hear what CK. We just watched it. We just watched it right before I got these guys to watch it. And CK, I don't think you're too happy about it.
I don't know. I always feel a little bit bad because I think, I feel like a lot of my response, the immediate reaction from folks will be well, you just don't like DC, so obviously you have problems with this trailer. And part of that is true. I think that, in terms of, story content and maybe tone, Marvel, both as a comic book brand and as the Marvel Cinematic Universe, has always been a little bit closer to my personal preferences, which is also the case with Arrow. I prefer the Flash because I like feeling like I want to bounce my head after every episode. But the Batman vs. Superman trailer, as it is, just makes me feel so much like they're kind of building towards this really overarching Injustice storyline. And Injustice was a fun game for me to play, and the comics are probably really fun too, but I don't know that that's necessarily what I want to go see in my movies. I don't know that that's what I want a Flash movie or a Green Lantern movie to be building up to. It's just a little too... I wish that there were even hints of levity at any point in this movie, or hints of anything other than oh man, is Superman gonna develop a god complex? Because it's when I want to experience that storyline, I read Kingdom Come. So this, I don't know, this trailer, it seems like it's going to be a great movie, and I'll probably go see it. It'll be a fun action movie to see, but in terms of a DC movie, I don't know that I'm as excited as I really want to be about this film yet.
I like that it does look more like a Man of Steel sequel, and they're playing up that whole God allegory with Superman because honestly, I was never the biggest Superman fan, but as I've matured and grown up, and I've kind of realized that what makes Superman super is the choice to use those powers for good, like how easy it would be for him to just dominate the entire world and that choice to sacrifice and give for those people, which I know is a very Christ-like allegory, um, that's what sets that character apart. And they played it up big time in the first one, maybe too much when they go into a church and you see Jesus on the cross with a red robe that looked like a Superman cape, like strung up behind him. But I've liked that they're playing up that theme, and I'm one of the few that likes that all the DC movies are dark and gritty because I feel like they are sitting themselves at least apart from the Marvel movies, that they're not trying to be this hunky-dory, lighthearted. Not that all the Marvel movies are that, because that brand is so much more, but at least they have a direction. Well, I take that back. At least it appears they have a tonal direction for what they want to do. Now, that may not be everybody's cup of tea, but at least so far it seems like they're sticking to it.
Yeah.
My name is Gascley Stamus, and I approve of this trailer.
I feel the same way, Gascles. I've been a backer of Batfleck since day one. I'm one of the few people in this world that my guilty pleasure is the director's cut of Daredevil. I think
Me too.
like only the director's cut. If you haven't seen the director's cut, you can't judge me yet. Go watch it because
it's a different movie, man.
It is a different movie, and it's got way more Ben Ulrich, and it's got a lot of backstory, and it's fantastic. Jennifer Garner and Colin Farrell were just absolutely terrible in those movies, and there's nothing you can do about them. But it was not Ben Affleck's fault that movie was bad, and he was a fantastic Daredevil for that version of Daredevil. I'd
agree.
Yeah, and I think he looks fantastic as Batman on both Armored and original. Like, they covered up his chin. You can't see the butt.
He's kind of got a little, like, Arkham Knight kind of, with the glowing eyes and stuff, yeah.
Oh, man, those glowing eyes. I tell you, with Deadpool and this Batman, all they need to do with most superheroes is just give them the white eyes, man. Like, Deadpool looks fantastic as well. So, yeah, that I approve of it as well.
And everybody that, complains about Ben Affleck being Batman, they're thinking of, like, Geely. They're not thinking about the Ben Affleck that has directed and starred in Best Picture winning Argo, or was in The Town, or was in Gone Girl. I mean, everything he's touched in the past 8 years or so has turned to gold. So I was happy when he was cast in the role.
Yeah, I thought of The Town immediately when he got cast, because he's gonna have that kind of mentality, I feel like.
Well, everybody fixates on his Boston accent, right? And I'm like, we've seen him in movies not do that, so I think it'll be okay. Right. What makes me most excited from that trailer is that you see all that stuff with Batman and Superman, and then when you realize that is going to be just a part of the story, that the story is really going to be all these other members of the Justice League kind of coming out around whatever's going on between Batman and Superman, like, super jazzed about that.
I hope that is not the focus of the movie. Like, I hope it's still a Batman, Superman film at its core, and not like Iron Man 2 felt like just the precursor to the Avengers and not an Iron Man movie. So I hope they don't make that mistake here.
I think they're just introducing characters to get, basically pulling a Marvel Spider-Man. They're going to introduce a few characters so they can get out of the origin story movie with the Flash and everything, because that's what they're doing with Spider-Man. I prefer it that way.
I'm hoping it's 50-50. I'm hoping that like half the movie is the whole conflict between Batman and Superman, and then I hope, and I'm just throwing crap out, and then I hope the other 50 is all these other heroes come out. You realize it's a universe of metahumans, not just these two, and maybe even in this first movie they all start they initially like choose sides. And then maybe there's something out of that whole Aquaman movie poster about Unite the Seven, right? And then that dude shows up and he somehow needs to figure out how to like unite them all into the precursor to the Justice League.
Whoa, Gascles, choose sides. That sounds like a civil war. All right, so Avengers 4, no surprise, is going to feature the Defenders, which for anyone that doesn't know who the Defenders are, it's going to be it's all the Netflix characters, Daredevil, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, and Iron Fist.
Which are not the real Defenders, but...
No, they're not. But it's no surprise that they're going to be Avengers 4. I mean, they're putting them in the same universe for a reason.
They should be called the Marvel Knights.
Yep, they should be called the Marvel Knights, and they should include Spider-Man and Punisher in that. And Moon Knight. I want Moon Knight.
I want a Punisher. I want a Punisher Netflix series now.
All I want is a Daredevil season 2 that features Moon Knight versus Daredevil in an episode where Moon Knight's like half talking to himself half the episode and then fighting Daredevil the rest. That would be the best. Ryan Gosling is in talks to play the opposite of Harrison Ford in Blade Runner 2, so the bad guy. Ryan Gosling's pretty good. I like him. So I'm cool with that. Jared Leto, I don't know, I showed you guys the picture of his Joker hair. What do you guys think of that? It looks very original animated series.
Yeah, Jared Leto has also been doing his Joker voice when he's been on tour with his band. What is it? Is it something to Mars? 50 Seconds to Mars? 30 Seconds to Mars. Okay, yeah. I mean, anybody that saw Dallas Buyers Club, you see where he played a transgender in that movie and just how he just encompassed that role so much, and the struggle with AIDS, and just he's a true method actor, just like Heath Ledger was. And I think he's the perfect person to kind of, I know it's a different incarnation here, but to carry on the torch of the Joker.
Yeah, no one will fault him on his voice because there's no one that can do Mark Hamill, but they can't do the Joker better than Mark Hamill. So as long as Jared Leto sounds somewhat like him, I'm cool. He's got the hair down, which is fantastic. It's just swept back and it has the 3 points. Just keeping on with some more comic movie news. I know we talk about comic movies a lot on this podcast. Thanos isn't going to be the only villain in Infinity War. I wrote no shit here because they cram every comic book movie crams as many villains as they possibly can into every movie. So,
although I will say the Avengers franchise has not yet gone to the extremes of X-Men 3, Spider-Man 3, and
right. No,
what was it? Yeah, those.
They haven't gone
just don't kitchen sink
Batman.
Right, just don't kitchen sink it. If they kitchen sink it, then I'm going to be pissed.
Yeah, I hope they just have one good villain. Hopefully it's not Loki. Hopefully they just have like a lieutenant of Thanos and maybe Nebula.
Have you ever read what's the Infinity, where he has all those different kind of the generals like the Ebony Maw and all those different people? Maybe those will be some of the villains.
That was speculated.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll do that because that's a lot of villains to keep up with. But they'll bring back someone. It could be Red Skull for all we know. He got warped by the cosmic cube. He could be. But
Red Hugo Skull. Weaving said he's done with that role, so they'd have to Hugo Weaving
for that role. You just need someone that sounds like him that'll wear a mask. Screw Hugo Weaving.
Could be armored Red Skull, like from the Ultimate Avengers animated.
That'd be cool. Or Red Onslaught. You never know what they'll do. Spider-Man, Marvel's saying he was always part of the Phase 3 plans. Even before they knew they were going to get him, or before the talks, they had always planned on basically, they had always planned on just giving in to Sony.
I have plans for when I win the lottery too. So
yeah, so we'll see. They're just all. I think they're just, whatever. Angelina Jolie's still being sought to direct Captain Marvel.
Really?
Yeah, which is okay. She hasn't directed a whole lot. She's directed like 4 movies, but
did y'all see Unbroken? I didn't get a chance to see it, but she directed that.
Apparently, it was good.
Yeah, I heard it was real good.
She needs to film Salt 2 before she directs Captain Marvel.
I like Salt. It's a good movie.
We already mentioned Patty Jenkins to direct Wonder Woman. Matthew Vaughn is going to be directing the Flash Gordon movie reboot.
Is that the guy who did Kick-Ass?
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm excited about Flash Gordon. It's about time. I mean, you figure they're going to do it.
I just want Ted to cameo in the movie.
Yeah, he might. There were some pictures from Jessica Jones that showed that Luke Cage is going to be in that series, which is good because she is Luke Cage's girlfriend / wife at some point in the comics. So it'd be good if they met in her series. I hope it's not going to center around him, of course, but I hope they kind of do his origin in that as well. And then they also showed David Tennant as Purple Man, which I'm a little disappointed by. He's just a man in a purple suit. He looks more like a kind of a knockoff Joker that couldn't afford the hair and makeup. But I wish, hopefully at the end of that series, he'll actually turn purple. Orange is the New Black got renewed for Season 4. I'm excited about that. They teased Season 3 a little bit this week. So that's exciting. Joe Dirt 2. I had no clue this was coming out. I'm excited about it.
It's going to be streaming on Crackle.
Yeah.
Which is a free streaming service, I believe. So.
Yeah, man. I wasn't like a huge fan of Joe Dirt 1, but I mean, it's cool to be surprised by a movie that I had no clue was coming out. So, I love David Spade. Whatever. Is it David Spade that's going to play him in the movie?
Yeah, it's David Spade. Hope it has Dennis Miller in it. Yeah, Walken's in it.
They showed a kind of a teaser picture of Michael B. Jordan as Apollo Creed in the Creed movie. I feel like everyone's trying to get him and stuff.
He's Apollo Creed's son, right? And Rocky's going to train him.
Right.
Yeah.
I think he's like Apollo Jr. or something. I don't know.
I'm really excited for that movie. I mean, I love the whole Rocky Balboa franchise. Michael B. Jordan, that guy is the next big A-list star, in my opinion. I think 10 years from now, he'll be a name like Tom Cruise, like Denzel Washington, Will Smith. I just think that's a guy that everybody's going to know.
Yeah. Let's go into something we haven't talked about this whole podcast, comic book movies. What'd you guys, we saw the Ant-Man trailer this week. What'd you guys think of the full trailer?
CK?
Silence.
You ready? Oh.
No one care.
I can have opinions on anything. I haven't watched it yet, but I've heard there's Yellow Jacket in it, and that's pretty much all that I'm going for. I'm excited to see Congressman Pete Russo living the dream as a Marvel supervillain.
Yeah, he looks good, man. Yellow Jacket, they show.
Is it a female Yellow Jacket?
I don't know. It's got the robotic voice, the real deep kind of Ultron-y voice. They could twist it into a female.
Okay. So it's not Janet Van Dyne, we think?
No, it's not Janet Van Dyne. He's played by the guy who's, I think he's the lead character in The Strand now. He was in House of Cards season 1, and now he's on The Strand, and now he's Yellow Jacket.
Yeah. Well, don't like Ant-Man. Don't like that character. They're not interested until they put Wasp in that movie.
Well, Evangeline Lilly, who's she playing? Because she looks a lot. She's Hope Van Dyne.
Yeah, Janet is apparently not appearing. # Janet Van Crime.
It's weird because Evangeline Lilly has the bob.
Well, if they're lining it up, if Michael Douglas is Hank Pym, it might make sense for Janet Van Dyne to also be depicted as older from the previous generation. And if they have Hope is supposedly her daughter, then maybe that works.
Yeah, so they could easily make Hope the Wasp.
Yeah.
I just, I heard this on a couple of sites, that Thomas the Tank Engine scene, the train scene that's in that trailer. I mean, that almost looks like a a parody for like Saturday Night Live or something. I'm afraid, guys, that this movie was going to have a very kind of niche, tonal kind of perspective on it, like an Edgar Wright type film. He was, behind this whole thing for years and years. And now they got the guy who directed Yes Man. I can't remember the guy's name. I think it's Peyton Reed is the guy's name off the top of my head. And I'm afraid it's just somebody come in, kind of filled the job. And this may be the first really bad Marvel Studios movie. I hope not, but
I don't think it will be. It's as I was watching Daredevil, I kept thinking to the Ant-Man teaser, and I was just like, it's same with S.H.I.E.L.D., like this just doesn't feel like the same universe to me, but I don't know. It's just
you just can't bat 1,000, and I feel like they have. Like they have not. There's movies you don't like, but as far as financial success, they've had it on every single one of these, and I don't know if people are gonna rush out to see Ant-Man.
Yeah, I think this could be the movie that everybody was afraid Guardians of the Galaxy was gonna be.
Yeah.
Right. But I think people are they're like, well, Guardians turned out so good, so we won't bash this movie yet until we've seen it. And So let's move on to, does anybody here still watch Gotham?
I'm 7 episodes behind, and now that they have every single villain in the DC universe on there, I've kind of lost all hope.
You're like, Sinestro and Darkseid were on. A producer is teasing the birth of the Riddler, which I'd actually be interested in. I might actually have to start watching if they're going to have the Riddler in, because he's my favorite Batman villain.
Well, the guy who's Edward Nygma is really good. He's like one of the bright spots of that entire show. So I would like to see that. That is one that makes sense organically, but some of these other ones, they just pigeonhole them in there.
Yeah. All right. So Doctor Strange might be British now. I don't really care about that. Let Benedict Cumberbatch do his thing. I've never been a big fan of Doctor Strange, but it's kind of like Gascles was saying with changes to characters. It doesn't affect him one bit. He's just going to be doing incantations half the time anyways. Ian McKellen's going to play Cogsworth in the live-action Beauty and the Beast. That'll be interesting. I wonder if he's going to dress up like a clock. Or if, I don't know, if he'll just be like the voice and then eventually turn into him at the end. It's like, oh, he turned into Gandalf. Mark Ruffalo's been kind of just going around the circuits mentioning, that they're wanting to do a Hulk film or do future films with the Hulk in it, but they're having trouble with Universal Pictures getting the rights.
Yeah, Disney cannot, since Disney now owns Marvel, they cannot release a solo Hulk movie. Universal still owns the rights to a solo movie, and
they only own the distribution rights. Marvel can make one, but Universal will get most of the money off of it, so there's no point in making one.
And when they did the first one, it was before Disney had bought Marvel Studios when they did the one with Edward Norton. So,
So hopefully that will work out as well as Spider-Man did, because I'd love to see just a Planet Hulk and get Mark Ruffalo more into the universe. Eddie Redmayne got cast as the frontman in the Harry Potter spinoffs. I don't know if y'all are excited about those.
No.
They've been trying to get, I think it's Stephen King who wrote Dark Tower. They're trying to get a movie for Dark Tower through for the past year. They finally have a script at Sony, and they're moving forward on a Dark Tower movie. What did you guys think of the picture of the Thing from the Fantastic Four reboot?
It looks like the Thing. Like I said on the Capes podcast, it looks very thingy. It looks like Ben Grimm. It looks like the comic version, so I'm happy.
He's just missing eyebrows for me. But yeah, he looks okay. He doesn't look as cheesy as the Michael Chiklis one, but I thought Michael Chiklis was a perfect Thing anyways, so.
Yeah.
Where am I here? All right, Lego Movie writers are wanted for the Flash film, which is interesting. I'm not sure what they're aiming for with getting the Lego Movie silly writers for the Flash film.
Hearing that makes me keep my fingers crossed that it could secretly turn out to be a Wally West film in the vein of Justice League Wally West,
Yeah.
No.
like the animated series, which like would be kind of a nice way to lighten up the overall universe a little bit. I would welcome that movie in that
Ugh.
universe.
Why don't you want Wally, Gaskleys?
It again, it's potentially a generational difference. I sometimes forget that there's a whole generation of people who, to them, if you were into comics after Crisis on Infinite Earths up through like the early 2000s, like I guess Wally West was your Flash, and that still is very strange to me because to me Barry Allen is the only Flash, and Wally was only ever just filling in.
The only reason I would be okay with Wally West is because I don't want them to make a whole Flash movie because I love the CW Barry Allen. Daniel Radcliffe is in talks to play the lead in the Grand Theft Auto movie, which isn't a Grand Theft Auto movie. It's about the guy who was trying to ban the game multiple times. So,
And that's unfortunate because I would have loved to see Daniel Radcliffe playing like the no name character from Grand Theft Auto 3.
Yeah, me too. I was excited that there was a Grand Theft Auto movie coming until I read what it's going to be about. There's an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. spin-off coming. Is anyone excited about this? I'm not excited about that at all.
Is it going to be revolved around Deathlock? Is that what
No,
it's gonna be,
they're thinking it's going to be like the Flash version of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where it's going to be Skye and her secret warriors. Like it's going to be
that's
like,
a good comic book, but I don't know if we need another
I don't think
S.H.I.E.L.D.
it's going to be actual secret warriors, but it's going to be
Okay.
like Skye and the superpowered, like the Inhumans version. Like you're gonna have Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is like the normal people and like the not metahumans, and then you're like Arrow, and then you're gonna have like the Flash with Skye and all the metahumans and the crazy stuff.
That'll hurt Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because I think a lot of people tune in to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to see those
Yeah.
inhuman threads.
Excuse me. The Vision poster got revealed. That was kind of cool. I'm
Yep, I
okay
like
with
it.
it.
Yep.
Yeah. Brad Bird is just now starting to write the Incredibles 2 script. It's about damn time, Brad Bird, you jerk.
He's
Ben,
busy with Tomorrowland.
I don't care about Tomorrowland. Give me an Incredibles 2. Ben Hardy got cast as Angel in X-Men Apocalypse. That's cool. The concept art for Angel looks great. He looks more Archangel because he's got the metal wings.
Well, that's why I think it's cool because hopefully,
Yeah.
I mean, it would make sense that you would put Archangel in there if you're going to have Apocalypse in.
Right. I'm hoping he is going to be one of the horsemen.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and that in Psylocke. Psylocke could be a horseman. She was a horseman as well.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. The Millennium sequels from the American version, the Millennium is Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, could move on without David Fincher. You know, they released the first one, and there's 3 of them, and the first one didn't do that well, so David Fincher dropped out. Still, like I said in the Reboot podcast, the Millennium sequels aren't needed. The Swedish version is fantastic. Go watch those. The Need for Speed sequel was announced. I don't really care about that. Jesse Pinkman driving a car. That's cool.
Dominique Cooper again, though.
Oh, I know. We've got Fast. There's already too many Fast movies. Shots fired, but I'm sorry. They're remaking She's All That. Is that something that needs to be done?
No.
I love She's All That.
I do too. I think if you grew up in that time period, you love that movie.
Like, why remake that? Why not? That's stupid. There's a Gremlins remake that is happening, and it got the Goosebumps screenwriter. So I didn't really read this article. I didn't know if it was the Goosebumps movie that's coming out, or if it was like a writer of the Goosebumps books.
I think it's the movie, the one that Jack Black's going to be in.
Either way, I'm excited because Goosebumps is kind of quirky and fun, scary, and Gremlins should be that way as well. And last but not least, something I'm super excited about. Last Man on Earth got renewed for season 2. Yay. And that's it. That's all for the news from pretty much like the past week and a half since we missed last week. I put a little bit older stuff in there. So let's move on. We're running super late. This is probably going to be our longest show ever. Let's move on to our closing statements, where you can tell us where we can find you, what you're doing on Geeks with Wives, and just any general geek thing that you've got going on. So we'll start with you, Gaskleys.
I'm break from social media, so I haven't re-engaged in that space yet. So you can only find me on Geeks with Wives right now, normally covering the comics book beat, but I plan on popping out a couple articles from time to time on games and TV and entertainment.
Awesome. Thanks, Agascles. And you can also find him. I'm sure he'll pop up on the Capes podcast and on this one again soon.
Aren't you about to be on Capes this next episode, Agascles?
The one after that on the 30th.
On the 30th.
Okay, it's coming up very soon. He will be on there. So
tune in for that. Brad, what's your closing thought?
All right, you can find me on Twitter at the Real Brad Bell, REEL Brad Bell, and you can find me on geekswithwives.com. I'm kind of took up the mantle of covering at least the main Convergence storyline. I'm the guy who's gonna at least spend $4 every single week on DC House art. I am that person, and I'm gonna do that labor of love for you people. So check out my Convergence reviews.
Yeah, and also catch Brad on the Capes podcast. He's going to be on there a lot more now that he's one of our comic editors. So check him out on there. He was great last night. CK, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter, CKCucco, CKCucco, like the bird from Zelda. You can find me on geekswithwives.com. Tyler and I are going to be doing a lot of coverage of Secret Wars. Maybe eventually me and Tyler and Brad will talk about Secret Wars versus Convergence, so to speak. And got a couple of other really exciting things coming up that we should have more details on soon.
Awesome. Thanks, CK. Yeah, I might have to join you on the Secret Wars stuff because I'm getting every book in that. So,
did you really tell your pull box person to pull Secret Wars all?
Yep.
Oh my God! Wow.
I'm going all in, man. I'm excited about every comic that's coming out.
I am too, but that's a financial commitment. Yeah, only people like Casey Walsh can usually pull off that kind of
Yeah, I mean Casey just checks everything on the list and just says, buy this for me.
There was a kid at my comic book store growing up. His dad was like a surgeon. I mean, he was really like the kid from Kick-Ass, and he would come in every week and get everything. And I'm like,
I bet Casey has like a butler that sits next to him and reads the comics to him while he gets fanned by a palm leaf. I'm just kidding.
Well, best of luck to you guys on that. I had to live through Earth 2, Future's End, and World's End earlier, last year and this year, and after that, I was like, "Yep, nope, not gonna do it."
Thomas Wayne arguably has one of the coolest Batman armor suits ever invented. All right, so closing out for me, you can find me on Twitter at EverettGetsIt. I don't hardly post anything, so don't follow me. I'm just kidding. I retweet a lot of Geeks on Screen stuff and a lot of just cool stuff that people tweet. I usually don't do a whole lot of original stuff. I say this a lot. But if you do want original content from me, you can find me on the Geeks with Wives YouTube channel, which hopefully you're watching this podcast on. If you're not, you're listening to it on iTunes, and you can find me on there as well. But the YouTube channel, please go there, subscribe to our videos. I put a lot of work into those, even though I get like 5 views on each. I don't do it for the views, I just do it because I love doing it. And hopefully you can see that in what I do. Me and Adam are continuing with Divinity Original Sin. We're just entering a new zone. So if you want to start watching that series, start with episode, I think, 53. We start the brand new chapter. So we just released episode 55, and 56 is coming out on Monday. And then subsequently Wednesday, Friday, every week. So you can find me there. I just did a review for this past week's Arrow episode. So now Brad's been covering the Flash episodes in his Flash Reverse, and I'm going to be trying to cover Arrow episodes in these last few episodes with my Arrow re-knocked review.
And we kind of had the same theme that Brandon Routh is like the best part of both right now. There's just something endearing about that guy.
Oh man, they're just, without spoiling, there's an episode, or there's a scene in the new Arrow where between Brandon Routh and Cisco, where Brandon Routh is asking Cisco like how their prisoners under Star Labs like eat and poop. and it's hilarious.
So let me ask one speculative question before we bounce out. Do we, by the end of the season, wind up getting all of the CW heroes on screen in a nay Justice League shot and action sequence?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You're
I think
absolutely.
photos have kind of
Yeah.
tipped the hand
There's
a little bit.
spoiler photos. Don't go look at them at gas, please, because they will ruin
Uh,
stuff for you. But
and don't read
But
Casey's messages in Group Me, or they will spoil them for you. So.
okay, good. You know, I'm a master of keeping myself cloaked and not getting exposed to spoiler stuff, so I'll definitely avoid that.
right, yeah, no, it's going to be exciting. I'm really excited for that. I need to catch up on Shield and stuff. But yeah, you can find. I'm going to be putting a little more attention to the Geeks with Wives entertainment section now that I got Brad's help in the comics. So expect more TV and movie reviews. We've got a lot of our reviewers that are excited. Like Chris Peary likes to review Bates Motel. If you're a American Psycho fan, you could check that out. I know Wayne has been reviewing a lot of shows for us and movies. And was it Chris or Corey? We just got a good memories of Star Wars from. I think it was, let me check real quick. One of our contributors that's at Celebration right now just got real super nostalgic about Star Wars while he was there, and
I want to say that was Corey.
I think it was Corey as well. He just basically went through.
It was Chris.
It was Chris.
Yeah.
It was Chris. I'm looking at it now. He went through just basically his feelings on Star Wars and how he feels about the new one coming in. So go check that out. It's got the teaser as well in that article. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Make sure you follow us on at Geeks with Wives, at Geeks on Screen. Follow the Capes Crew at GWW Capes Crew. Listen to the Press Any Key podcast where we talk about video games. You can listen to the Capes Crew podcast where they're supposed to just talk about comics, but they also talk about movies half the time.
Well, Star Wars is a comic now, too, guys.
No, it was a movie originally. It is our territory. I'm just kidding. I'm giving them so much shit about that because they're allowed to talk about comic movies, and they're all just talking about Star Wars now, so whatever. But yeah, follow them. They have actual celebrity guests on, which we're going to start trying to book some people soon on this podcast. So stay tuned for that. Please follow us on the YouTube. Make sure you go to geekswithwives.com. Check out what we got going on there. And thanks, everyone, for watching. We'll see you guys next time.